telling a different story, right? And
And
there has been some development. So, for example, one of the leading thinkers in business ethics is now Mr. Basserman, Professor Basserman of Harvard Business School, and he has a big thing about basically. So he's also a decision theorist. So that is good, right? He understands that ethics arises in decisions, in the context of decisions, which is a really good analysis. And actually, I was very much inspired by that, and I had a conversation with him as well about it when I set out to develop my model. But his main explanation of what's ethical and what is not is really not entirely useless, but maybe inadequate, which is basically a kind of modern utilitarianism. So you go back to John Stuart Mill's, where you can calculate, well, where this solution 10 people die, this solution 5 people die. Let's do the other solution where less people die. But obviously that is how shall I say? It's a good analysis because utilitarianism lends itself very well to the models that we use in business to judge what is the better solution. It's quantifiable, and we try to calculate the best outcome. So that is a higher degree of compatibility, and utilitarianism is certainly an ethical concept that is not the worst, right? But if you exaggerate it too much, you also arrive at a sort of cynical way to say, okay, well, this is the best solution, even if it's a terrible solution. Maybe it's one that you shouldn't do at all, right? Really, you mentioned it already before. You say maybe there are ethical tactics, but when you think a little bit more long term, maybe there's an ethical strategy in a business. Maybe there's an unethical strategy in the business itself. So my opinion is you really have to look at the business model, and that is really the first thing that you have to look at. And maybe there are some things that you just shouldn't do. So if you remember, we were just talking about utilitarianism, and that when you have a bad solution that is still the best solution, it might still be too bad to actually do it. So, for example, if you take the casino business, for gambling, in Austria, for example, this is a state-owned monopoly. Well, it is based on the premise that you can make people addicted to gambling and then take all their assets. And really, if you were to factor out this group completely, it wouldn't be a profitable business. So all those claims that it's an entertainment business and so on are totally bogus. It is insincere. And you have to ask yourself, how can you make this entertainment business such that it is not so harmful to certain vulnerable groups in society? And while this might be a stark example, it becomes more difficult if you think about tobacco or think about alcohol. Well, alcohol, you can't ban alcohol completely, right? So it has also positive aspects to consume alcohol. Maybe some doctors say it has no positive aspects, but we can agree on that there are positive aspects in culture and in our quality of life. But where exactly do you draw the line, right? And when it comes to energy industry, again, we have these incredible trade-offs. Everybody needs energy. Our whole civilization will cease to exist without energy. But on the other hand, how do you responsibly gain energy without destroying our planet? I mean, these are really deep questions that you have to grapple with when you are the leader of such an organization.
Are you familiar with the concept of wicked problems?
Absolutely. I mean, it starts with the commons.
Yeah. This is a term that I picked up recently, and I read a couple books on it, and I found it very interesting. And the very principle of wicked problems is the concept that there's certain systemic or societal problems out there that are so complex that there's not a one-time solution for it. They're difficult, if not impossible, to solve. Like, I don't know, might it be world hunger or homelessness or what it might be. Or, for example, some of the constraints that we have with the way our society is built up, for example, with petrochemical products and stuff like this. You mentioned beforehand the Austrian lottery system. I think the the government solution to that is that it's something that's maybe not a net positive for the society if it goes to a certain extreme, but there's a tendency to bet one way or the other. At least it's in government hands. So at least the revenues that are generated go back to the government, so that on the other hand, they can use those profits to benefit society. And I think, for example, state-run lotteries are a good, not solution, but a semi-solution for these kind of wicked problems. I think if we're looking, for example, at petrochemical things, there's certain situations where petroleum companies will get the rights to certain property. They'll extract oil from there for a long, long time, make horrendous profits. And when the wells run dry, they'll leave them there, and the ground will be contaminated. But the companies have dissolved; they no longer exist. And when you say, "Well, who's responsible for cleaning up?" The people who benefited from it don't pay for it. Or another example: the pharmaceutical companies during COVID. A lot of the pharmaceutical companies in the United States and elsewhere got funding from taxpayers to do research to come up with a vaccine. Did we get a return of investment for that money that taxpayer? No. And these are ethical issues that create a certain cynicism. Would you agree?
Yes, I think you point out a good solution or a good approach. Let's say it's not a solution of how you can mitigate those wicked problems, and certainly to use the public funds, and use the government to redirect those streams of income is certainly a very viable solution, provided that you also think that government is a good thing. That is not really in the spirit of the times. Says, well, less government is better.
Propaganda is trying to convince us that government is inofficial and everything needs to be in private hands. I don't want to live in a world where private equity and private companies are responsible for our schools, for our social welfare.
That's right. So, to continue with that three-part framework, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, we came to the first point really to the philosophical, and what is the source of ethical behavior? Mm-hmm. But then I think in the second level, I call this the operational level. There's so many things we can do, and I think all the things that we already mentioned, they fit into this category. Mm-hmm. So it is what we do on the operational level. Do we separate our trash? Do we do recycling? Do we have fair hiring practices? Do we compensate our employees in a fair way? Do they have a good pension? What is our hire and fire policy? Is there any discrimination? Is there inclusion? And I don't mean to be a woke ideologist for DEI, but clearly to be fair to everyone involved, and also to build teams that are efficient and effective, also involves these kind of things. But it could also be, what is the environmental impact of our company? Do we have good working conditions where people can, don't get sick while they work, right? Is it, do we care about education and continued training, and you name it? You can see there's many such factors, and I think that's really what many people today think about when they think about ethics in the workplace, and that's why I really want to include that, because that is, of course, this is the practical manifestation, and when of an ethical workplace, and many employees will say. Yeah, this is a great company. This is a good company because they treat us well, and because we do this and that, and it makes me proud, and so on. I mean, you were talking about this pharmaceutical industry. I mean, arguably you could say that those research dollars went to a great public good, because arguably with the vaccines that were developed, potentially millions of people's lives were saved.
Or you could, from a financial perspective, say the cost of the medicine was then cheaper. But
yeah. So, but I mean, obviously, you have to look into the details to see what is if there has been some ethical deviation. And then, as mentioned already, so obviously, this is a whole bunch of measures that you should have your eye on. Mm-hmm. And then to the third level is, of course, the leadership level itself. And I think that's the most critical one, because if there's no ethical behavior, or no, let's say, no, it's more than a behavior, it's really a kind of culture. It's something that is, you can't pinpoint on one specific decision or so, but it's really about, it's about habits. It's about, so basically, I've structured it in 3 different parts. One is basically the questions of character and values. And this is a difficult question, because how can you say, okay, this manager has a good character or bad character, right? But why? Sometimes I ask myself, why is this question not asked? Why do we just say, okay, he's a very smart and he's very successful, and that's really all that is required of somebody. Very rarely will you ask, is he a good person? Does he have attitudes that benefit other people, that benefit society and so on, right? So or does he, I don't know, is he of a particular faith maybe that inspires ethical behavior? I mean, I don't say that certain such traits are a prerequisite for certain jobs. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it should be part of the conversation. And when I talk about a person's character, a leader's character, I mean, what are his values, his or her values? Mm-hmm. And when the values are, well, I want to make as much money as humanly possible, then that should be on the table, and say, okay, well, you have a leader who is really trying to maximize that, right? Or maybe he's has an allegiance to a political party and says, I want to do everything to support that, that direction in which the country or the economy is going. So, so in my opinion, this is a very important question, and it can be assessed with certain techniques, like, for example, with surveys and with interview questions. And the second aspect is, I call this the habits, and that is really that describes how a leader cultivates himself, right? So this is maybe an old Confucian idea of self-cultivation, but that is like for ancient Chinese thinking, Confucian thinking. This is a prerequisite for any leader, that he keeps improving himself. And the question is, what is he really doing? Is he reading books? Is he meditating? Is he or she, obviously I always mean men and women equally, does the leader spend time just to think about things, right? For analysis. What's the process for making decisions? I think this is a very key one. How broad, a spectrum of advisors and helpers does he or she cultivate, and so on. There are many, many other things about these habits, which also go into behavior. And so, for example, if you have a leader who's shouting around all the time, who falls into tantrums, and who's treating his underlings in a despicable way, then obviously that's also part of the entire personality that you need to take into account, right? So that's the second level. And the third level is, I think, really on the level of skills, right? So obviously we know that a leader needs the executive function parts. He needs to be good at analysis, good at decision making, and so on, right? But I mean, really, what should be looked at here is how you can put ethical ideas into action. Right?
So does you mentioned